Hey class, today we're going to talk about epithelial tissues. Epithelial tissues are generally just layers of cells that are either glands or protective linings. So epithelial tissues, the root word is epi, which means on the surface, but epithelial tissues make up linings, they make up glands, and they're primarily determined by their cell shape and the number of layers. So if you remember some simple cell shapes and some numbers of layers, you'll be just fine. The first cell shape is squamous, which means flat. It looks kind of like that. So if we were to draw it from the side, it would look something like that. And if we were to draw it from above, it would look like that. Now, these cells join together. Those are individual cells, but the cells join together to make tissues. So there's one cell, there's another. Notice how they sort of curve around. And what are they curving around? But they're curving around a tubule, which in this case might carry pee-pee or urine. This might be in the kidneys. Now, that would be considered simple squamous epithelium. Now we're going to talk about a layered tissue. But look, every tissue has stuff outside of it as well. So the blue things I just drew would be what we call extracellular matrix. They're not part of the tissue itself, but there are other parts in there. Now, this is going to be stratified squamous. Notice how the top layers are very flat, but the bottom layers are not. Now, stratified means there's multiple layers, whereas simple means there's one layer. So we have simple squamous epithelial tissue and stratified squamous epithelial tissue. Those are our first two types of tissues. The next type of tissue is made of cells that are cuboidal. That means they're cube-shaped. They might also be round. They might appear round under the microscope. So if I were to draw a tissue that was simple cuboidal, once again, these might be going around and forming a tube, and inside of the tube would once again be pee-pee or some other saliva or other secretion, and outside would be what we call extracellular matrix, or it might be non-living tissue outside of the cells. So now we're going to look at what might stratified cuboidal look like. Well, you guessed it, it's two layers of cube-shaped cells. So we have simple cuboidal on the left and stratified cuboidal on the right. And we need to make sure to add epithelial tissue to each one of these. The name of the tissue is stratified cuboidal epithelial tissue. The next shape is columnar, and these cells, as you guessed, might look like little columns. Now, these are often found in places like the intestine, and what I'm drawing would be an intestinal villus, and lining the edge of that villus would be one layer of column-shaped cells. And then there's some non-living matrix in between the cells or outside of the cells. And this would be what we would call stratified columnar over here. We'd have a layer of cells that look cuboidal, and on top we'd have a layer of cells that look columnar. So on the left we have simple columnar epithelial tissue, and on the right we have stratified columnar epithelial tissue. Now, there is a third type of epithelial tissue that's kind of a weirdo. It's called pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. And remember, pseudo means fake. Pseudonym is a fake name. So we have cells that don't look columnar, and they look like multiple layers, but in reality, they're actually only one layer. So they're pseudostratified, not actually stratified. And so how does that actually, what we're looking at there, how is that only one layer? Well, imagine my finger are columnar cells, but they're all wrapped together and twisted together. If we were to look at those under the microscope, you couldn't see each finger extending all the way to the surface. You'd only see bits and pieces of each finger. So this is called pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelial tissue. And the ciliated means it's got cilia, which look like little hairs on the surface. The final type of tissue is a mishmash of cell shapes. There's no regular pattern to it. You see all the cell shapes in it, and we call it transitional epithelium. And there's just a whole bunch there, and they're just sort of piled together in any sort of random order. And under the microscope, we've got our non-living matrix, which is outside of the epithelial tissue, and then we're just going to have a number of different shaped cells stacked one on top of the other. Some cells might have two nuclei, and we'd say they're binucleated. Some are large, some are small. I don't know what I just drew there. But that is transitional epithelium. So remember, We've got simple epithelia and stratified, 1 layer and 2 layers. We've got squamous, which are flat, cuboidal, which are cube-shaped, columnar, which are column-shaped, and then transitional has no shape. So if it's a simple tissue, it tends to be an absorptive function. So simple squamous, simple cuboidal, and simple columnar are all there to absorb things, whereas stratified squamous, stratified cuboidal, stratified columnar, and transitional are protective. So remember these key vocab terms, and remember that pseudo equals false, and you'll be well on your way.